Morning, everybody. My name is Corey Turrentine. I'm from Spokane Conservation. Crystal Sadler from Foster Creek and I have put together a track this year. Hopefully you guys all enjoy it. You'll have something new, some new connections, good conversation. And if you're interested in getting involved, we love to have collaboration. I'm looking to kind of take a little bit of a step back, but I still would like to continue being involved. But either way, at the end of the day, it's not a huge time commitment. It's just really beneficial to have more voices kind of contributing to the content that we bring. So that's really beneficial for everybody here at the table. So just a couple housekeeping tips. We have the OWL, which means that if you're in the back and you have a comment or a question, please try to speak up. If you're online, joining us virtually, let us know if you're having any issues, can't hear, can't see, anything like that. And with that, I think we'll hand it over to the commission. Thank you.
We're going to run through this all fiscal year end, and then we'll open it up for questions, right? So I'm on the Conservation Commission. I'm the grant manager on the commission. Okay, I'm Ashley. I do the county sub grants.
And also, can I do contracts?
Nicole Boyes, contract manager. I'm the grant specialist. I'm a monthly volunteer. We're happy to be here today. I'm going to start off walking us through the FY24 fiscal year that we're in. It's just a fiscal year close this year, not the biennium, so there's not a whole lot that is required for you for your grants. If you,
We can try. It wasn't working.
oh,
We'll try. It's more promising than yesterday. Had a light on there. Okay.
on 30th is the last day of fiscal year 24. So that is the last day to incur funds on any fiscal year grant. So you have to have purchased everything, you have to have received all your materials by June 30th in order for you to vouch for them in this fiscal year. July 1st starts FY25 and the last fiscal year of the biennium. So for your FY24 grants, there are only going to be a couple that close out. All your closeout forms are going to be due on July 10th, along with any final reports that are due at this grant. So right now, you're going to close out, if you have an implementation grant, you'll close out your implementation grant because it's a fiscal year grant. If you have an engineering grant, you're going to close out that engineering grant. Any task orders that you have, those will all close this fiscal year. We will restart all of those grants for FY25. So you'll have a new allocation, you'll submit a new addendum for those grants. There's a couple grants that require final closeout forms. You'll do one for implementation, called the CTA reporting form. You'll do one for RCCC, which will also close for riparian plant propagation. Sustainable farms and fields, if you have that grant, that requires a final fiscal year report because that will close out as well. And then if you purchase any equipment on your Sustainable Farms and Fields grants, there's a specific form as an annual report for your equipment purchase. So July 30th is when all of the FY25 addendums are due. So like I said, if you have an implementation grant, engineering, Sustainable Farms and Fields, riparian plant propagation, you will submit new grant addendums for those grants. The new Sustainable Farms and Fields CPA fund, it's called SF1. That runs for 2 years, so you won't have to.
Okay.
Yeah, I know it's confusing now because we have two buckets of funds. One is just fiscal year, which is we call it the original SFF, and then we have SF1, And, yeah, it makes it hard, and that one will run the full line.
Did you want me to go forward?
Yeah. Okay, so for the first time, we opened up the grants procedure manual in between the biennium. So this year, we had lots of questions on this topic, and it's gonna be the monthly vouchering. So you guys would have noticed this year in your vouchering, we require monthly vouchering, and that includes all of your expenses. So if you have a receipt from March, it needs to be included on the March voucher. We've really been hammering that home for you guys. We heard feedback and we reached out to the auditor's office for the clarification on it. So the one change, we put this out for comment and we got one comment on it. And we put it in the newsletter. So I'm not gonna read it all, I'm just gonna tell you guys. So we talked to the auditor's office and they consider an expenditure on a credit card purchase specifically. That's mostly where we got our questions about, is when you actually pay your credit card statement. So if you incur it in March, it's not going to be due on that March voucher. It'll be due on that April voucher after you pay your credit card statement. I see all your heads nodding. So that's a good change. Yeah, that's a good change for everyone, right? Yeah. Mike first.
Oh, no, go ahead. That's fine.
You can go.
Need to submit the payment, credit card payment supporting documentation.
Yes. So that's the thing. So if you have a receipt where you paid for something at the store and you picked it up right then, like you went and purchased materials for your grant, you would include that in your March voucher. We're going with March today. But if you bought it on a credit card, then you would wait until you paid your credit card statement with that on it, and you would include that credit card statement so we could know that that was a credit card purchase with your April billing.
Yeah.
I know. I know we all knew that that was gonna be a problem.
So the end of the year spending that has to be done by July 1st, then, so if you put it on a credit card June 15th, and your credit card wasn't due, you better write a check to pay that, even though we haven't got the bill yet.
Yeah, let's talk about that because we do that in our agency. So when we pull up our credit card statement online as of June 30th, and then actually we'll go through everything, make sure we receive everything as well, and cut a check for that. And then the rest of it, you can voucher for on your July. Does that make sense? You want to add anything to that? Yes. Like,
That was it.
that was it?
I was gonna say, yeah, make sure you're printing up for all the fund year-end funds, make sure you're going in and not your credit card statement ahead of the
Yeah. And you have to receive your items.
So Courtney, you said the rest of it you can pay for on your, or you can submit in your July voucher.
Yeah, so if you have a credit card statement
Uh-huh.
that runs, because not every.
Oh, if it cuts the period. Okay, gotcha. I didn't get that part. Mm-hmm.
If it's June 15th to July 14th,
Mhm.
if you have a credit card statement that runs like that, you would print everything June 30th voucher for it on your F5, your last
Gotcha.
June voucher. And then you would take the rest of that if it was July 1st through July 14th, and you would voucher for it on the July.
We will implement this policy then. When?
This will take effect July 1st.
Going to be back to my option.
Yep, on the July voucher, so FY 25.
July voucher for June expenses or August voucher for July expenses?
It'll be effective, your June voucher is due July 10th. It runs with the old rules. Your July voucher that's due August 10th for FY 25, it'll take effect for that one. Does anybody have any questions on that? That's really the only change we made to our manual, and I know that it's a little tricky. Everybody's favorite topics, cost share and dip. So we're gonna dive in here. Does anybody have any questions on what is considered a cost share and what is considered a dip? I'm gonna run through it. So cost share is very different than dip and vice versa. They're not interchangeable. You can't start a project as a cost share and then change it to a dip halfway through. Because there's different rules that that surround it. So when we award funding, Shellfish or NRI or any other funding, we'll ask you, is this a cost share or is this a DIP? Because in our system, we track it differently. And then there's different paths for you to follow based on which program type you pick. So for cost share, the district is awarded the funding. The landowner is responsible for every aspect of a cost share project. They buy the materials. They go and secure the contractors. If they're gonna have contractors do the work, they implement the project. They get all the receipts from you. They request reimbursement from the district. The district then reimburses the landowner, and then you can request reimbursement from the SCC. Right now, we have $100,000 cap per landowner per fiscal year for cost share. Yeah.
On the timing of the fiscal year with the 100% cap, let's say somebody was awarded 80,000 in November, or district court cost share 80,000 in November, and the project is almost ready to be done, but they're also looking at another one, but the cost share wouldn't get awarded until the next fiscal quarter. Is it just the best practice to wait and award the cost share that next month or that in July to start the clock on 100,000 again? That question's not come out.
So our rule is it's $100,000 per fiscal year per landowner awarded. We can award $100,000 per fiscal year to a landowner. So if they were awarded $80,000 in June and they're working on their project, technically they are allowed to apply for another $100,000 in FY25. If that project isn't completed yet, they can still apply for it. We can still award it. But there is a distinction between it's a per FY. Answer your question? No. So for cost share, we require every district to use the contract for cost share that's in CPDS. It's the only place you can find it. You must put your projects in CPDS. And the contract from there, no changes can be made to them. Say they don't know by the terms. Our AG has written it for us. Have to buy those in there. So when you go to submit cost share, you need a couple of things. You have to include the cultural resource compliance statement form. It's the first thing. You have to then submit the contract for cost share with all of the signatures, all of the initials. It must have all the dates because those are when all the effective dates are. And that's what we look at when we reimburse the contract. You also have to have the appendix B, which is your cost share detailed receipt form, which categorizes how much in labor for the project, how much in supplies for the project, total project cost, and what your cost share rate is. And then you have to update CPDS, but I have a slide because we both do. But I just want to point out for cost share, it's really important to have all those things because without those, we can't process it. It slows down the processing time. And probably the number one things we're missing are the signatures and dates. There might be a signature on that signature page, but there won't be a date. And that is super important because those dates show when your board approved it or your authorized signatory approved that cost share is good to incur charges. Yeah, that's a great question. So that's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking that because we award cost share by BMP, which is why in CPDS you put in what BMP and what the awarded amount is. We will go in and put in the awarded amount also. It prints on the funding page in the funding grid on the contract for cost share. So if you have a BMP that's worth $10,000, we've awarded $10,000. The costs, you go do the project, the cost for that BMP, maybe it came out to $12,000 when you apply your district's cost share rate. We can only reimburse what the contract says, up to that maximum of $10,000 for that BMP. They're not interchangeable. Does that make sense?
So on the $10,000 award, they've sent 8,000, because that extra 2,000 cannot shift to another BMP.
No.
On that same cost share contract.
No, well, I will say no, there's always exceptions. Typically no, because like Shellfish, for example, we do every BMP. If you have an NRI grant that has a little bit more flexibility, if you reach out and let us know. But once you've started the project, we really don't want to be going back and making changes because the landowner's already signed it. That means you have to go into CPDS, update it, have the new funding page printed, the landowner, your board or authorized signatory will have to re-sign the funding page. We have a process for it, but we really try to stick to these are your BMPs, these are your funding amounts.
So you don't want to be updating, like what you do with contract update, if they have funds available. Like, if they didn't spend all of their awarded amount at X, you don't really want to go.
No, we really don't want that. And it's really dependent on the grant funds. Because if you have Shellfish, that's not allowed at all. We're not going to redo that at all. But if you have a different fund source, like NI, that has more flexibility because you guys decide what projects you're going to do, then we can entertain that kind of.
So the NRIs.
It is.
Okay, quick, so how could we change that? So it's funded by a project. Or the cost share by project, so you can interchange money between BMPs. Is there a way to like resolution or?
So
Yeah.
So this is a commission decision. That's a policy. We've been around a long time, so we've seen it go back and forth. When I first started the commission, we funded by program or by project, I would say. You got $50,000, go do all your BMPs and tell us what you did. It gets a little tricky when you're reporting out that kind of stuff. So we can say we did $100,000, in projects, but what BMPs did you, how much, what were your metrics? It got a little confusing. So when and this was a leadership decision at the commission years ago, we decided it would be better to fund by BMP because the reporting metrics are better and easier to report. So our agency made that decision to fund by BMP. So it would take an agency decision to stand back, but it's how we're doing it now. Shauna, feel free to pipe in.
I'm sure you know this because, you've been doing this a long time, but when you when you enter into the contract itself, you're going off of estimates. And so it's hard to know where that budget, that the actual costs are going to lie between those BMPs. And so it is really hard when it's nice with, NRI that you have that flexibility. We don't do Shellfish, so I haven't really been in that scenario, but at the end of the day, when you get those invoices in and the contractor, bids, even if it's before the contract is complete, it likely isn't staying the same as what you estimated in practice. That's just a reality of it.
That's how legal about it is before you actually, the landowner gets some solid bids before you go in and you put everything in. So yes, we can get funding for NRI.
Mhm.
Yes. So put these in. But we understand that. That's why we came up with that process of updating it.
Mhm.
But if we say carte blanche, everybody can do
Yeah.
that. They can on your end,
Mhm.
on our end, tracking.
Mhm.
Right, that's why we have a tendency to do overarching, like waste transfer, instead of waste transfer, pipeline, blah, 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 concrete, and all that stuff. We just say it's waste transfer, and all piping and all that crap. It's in there, but it's only under one thing, 50,000 total, instead of breaking it down and saying, well, first of all, if you get a bill from these guys, you can't tell what's the pump and what's the pipeline and what's the, all the stuff that goes with it, because it's all mushed together. And then the other is you have to say, okay, well, I think it's this, but it could be that. So we just call it waste transfer, but that's maximum amount, and then it's up to that with the 75% plus. It's the easier way of handling it, and you don't have to do a lot of the methods.
Mhm.
But, so that's a good point. So what Courtney said is like, with NRI, we have more flexibility, so that's good. Something that may affect it where we have one into recently is VSP, which is also awarded based on the specifics of the project you propose. So that one's a lot harder to make changes to once it's awarded as well, because those BMPs specifically presented and awarded in that way. Don brought up a good point about what we call like umbrella practices, like waste transfer, watering systems, things like that, where it may be behoove a district to, because there's a component under that practice that make up the one ultimate practice, right? So in that case, that would work. We did run into a situation recently though, where a district tried to lump completely different BMPs under one BMP, which you can't, you gotta be really careful about. So where there's a waste transfer, where there's a pump pipeline, electrical, whatever it might be, that works because ultimately you've got your waste transfer system. But for example, you can't like an irrigation system and a wildlife planting and try to call it an irrigation system. So you have to separate those types of things out. Make sure that you guys are doing that when you're looking at Europe. And talk to us if you have any questions about how you want to approach that beforehand. It makes it a lot easier down the roads.
The only other drawback to the partial thing, you can't do a partial until it's already done. So they can't put it in the pipeline and get billed for it because practice isn't completed yet. So it has to all be done.
Yeah, you could break those out by BMP if you want to be able to do partial payments on them.
Right, but then you have to split it out. Not do the
I think you're looking at a case by case basis where it might be better one way.
Just for VSP, because that money is becoming fairly competitive, and money for projects it is important to be more detailed and keep going forward because there will be, there's been more competition and those are ranked and hopefully someday we can look at how we do the criteria in the ranking, but it doesn't matter for us, I think, because you are kind of not competing against each other, but there's a solid pot of money for that. Sorry.
Anybody have any questions on Foster?
clarification question. So with the SFF materials, we still have to do a CPDS agreement. But we got in some back and forth with our last voucher. And so yes, they have to have CPDS, but it's a material. But we need a cost share contract, so it's 100%. So a couple of these we distributed the seed, and the landowner hadn't seeded yet, they hadn't planted it yet. So it was a question of, okay, well, we have to voucher because we've spent this money on the seed, but they haven't done the practice. So what I did was I went ahead and sent in the CPDS with all the signatures except the final one. So then there's some confusion on the commission's part about, you don't have your signatures. I'm like, well, we spent the money, but it hasn't been done. So do we have to voucher for the money, but should we wait next time until after it's seeded and then send in that final?
Yes, like you have one final for the signature. Because it's voucher. Voucher is subject to the monthly vouchering rule.
Well, it's not cost share, it's a material.
Right, I think I emailed, you were out, right? I emailed about this. So for SFF, when you're awarded materials and it's just seed, and that program is specifically designed to give out seed.
Yes.
And we don't actually require the cost share contract.
It's in the SFF stuff that it is required. So you're saying,
Well, then
right
it
now,
Then
okay.
she's not here, but when I pinged her before, she said we didn't need the full signature. So I'll look it up. But if you have a contract and you send it in and it's not signed all the way, it won't get processed. That's why it was flagged. So if you are going to do that, wait till it's fully signed. And then the monthly vouchering, like even if you submitted a receipt that was in the previous month, but it's with cost share, that rule doesn't apply to cost share.
I'll read the stuff from Karen again, but my understanding was that's why we have to have the cultural resources applied statement form. If you are handing it out, see it at a workshop and you don't know where it's going, you don't have to do any of the CPS stuff. But if you're working with a producer
and you know it's this acreage and you know it's this property, then my do have to do CPDS and have to comply state form.
Renee, you're right on that. With that distinction, if you're doing a workshop and you purchase seed and everybody comes and gets it, that's material, you don't need a cost share contract. So but what you're saying is when you're working with direct landowners and you
That's what we've
can
been
that.
doing, yeah,
Yeah.
we've been up this.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that it's correct.
Yeah, and I would wait until you fully finish that from here. They signed it, it's implemented. Okay. Okay. Maybe did you have?
No, I think
Okay, dips. So there are lots of different kinds of dips that all fit into our district implemented project structure. One of the biggest things to remember is the district is responsible for every aspect of a dip. You are responsible for from start to finish. We give the district the money, you guys work with the landowner and the district. They do all the permitting, all the bidding, everything falls on the CD. And you guys implement the process. There's no cash that changes hands with a landowner. So they don't request reimbursement because they have a farm meeting, the district buys everything and installs it. That being said, because it's not a cost share, there is no limit on how much the project would cost. We provide a template on our website for districts to use. You don't have to use it. You guys are welcome to have your own district. One of the biggest things when you're requesting reimbursement is you have to have a compliance statement form, and you have to have that landowner implemented project contract when you voucher for the first set. You only have to submit it once, but before you can voucher for any bid costs, it has to be submitted. And we require monthly vouchering for dips, and that's for any TA that the district is putting in, overarching technical assistance, and then any direct implementation on a dip that a CD is doing, as well as any materials purchase. This last bullet is really important because this is really our first go around. We did dips last fiscal year, but this is the first, we had some, but this is the first time where we've had an abundance of dip projects come in, and it's hard for us to track when they're complete. Because if you remember last biennium, we required you to wait and voucher for your dips all at one time when the projects were finished. Well, this year we opened it up to monthly vouchering because that was a hardship on districts to be able to go months and months without getting reimbursed for their dip projects. So now monthly vouchering is allowed, but in order for us to know when your dip project is finished, we have to have some hook for you to tell us. We've had a couple districts send us Excel spreadsheets that say this is a CPDS number, this is the landowner, this is what we did, and the dip is closed. So we can go in and check to make sure that completed tab in CPDS is filled out, because that is when we know. We pull those reports based on what is input in that closeout tab. And so if we don't know the dip's done, we don't know to go and check it. And then when we finish any cost share, any dip that's completed goes into our implementation monitoring hot number random generator where you'll go and get those spotlight visits from the regional managers. So it's really important we know when your dips are finished. Even if you just write it on your voucher page, this one's finished, completed. So Homefish does a really good job on each of their detail pages. They'll write second billing, third billing on dip, fourth billing, final billing, so that it just kind of clues us in to be able to tell that we got to go in and check CPDS to make sure it's closed out. And this is the closeout tab. Just a screenshot. There's only 3 things that are required to close out a project. You'll have to put in your actual implementation measure for each B&B, what you actually install, the after photo, and then the completion date. Anybody have any questions? I'm going to pass it on to Kate. She does a lot of the cost sharing dip. But does anybody have any questions for me on anything? Okay, hello, I'm Kate. I'm a grant specialist, so I handle a lot of monthly vouchers. Courtney went over pretty much most of it, but I just wanted to include it here. So for cost share, what do I include in my voucher? The contract signed and dated with the correct funding rules for the entities, cultural resource statement with the project or landowner name, and you can include PMP, the outcome, just so it's clear what it's for. And then if the landowner worked on the project, basically we need their timesheet so that individual contributed services for. So that's signed by the landowner and each person that worked on the project. So if there's multiple people, we need each of them to sign it. The appendix B for each VMP, so not linked together. All the invoices that are listed on there. The closeout tab and CDBS, which goes over. And then if it is a partial or final payment, we'll need that form with it. If it's not, then you don't need to submit that. For the DIP, as she said, the first voucher, we need the signed landowner agreement and cultural resources for each landowner. So if there's multiple, just make sure there's multiple in there. And then a bigger detail page. You don't need to include an appendix B, but it's helpful since you already are used to doing it with the cost share. Just hold this every invoice. And just make sure it's clear which is for which landowner. It's easy to find. And differentiating between TA and DIP, especially for timesheets on the detail pages, that can be really helpful. All the invoices and timesheets listed. And then for the last voucher, she said CPDS, so we can check the closeout tab as well. And then monthly voucher. So checking vouchers and payments for accuracy. Basically just checking the budget spreadsheets that come with each voucher payment, making sure we're both on the same page and that I included everything correctly, that it's voucher to each correct outcome. And then if there's any issues, we can fix it then, rather than 6 months later when I'm not sure what's what. So it's just easier to fix right away. And then how to get vouchers paid quicker. So basically double checking everything. So signatures, dates, the backup on the detailed pages, the totals, the number of hours on the timesheets, deposit rates if they're not current, to making sure those are matching what's submitted. And then making sure charges are eligible or pre-approved. Checking if there's enough money left in the outcomes, which would be from checking with budget spreadsheets with each voucher. Identifying each outcome and then sending each voucher with a clear subject line so we know when we go into the grants inbox which one is for which person. Yeah, basically double checking everything. I think that's all I have. And any questions?
Boyd, I'm the contracts manager. I just thought it would be good to give a really quick update. You might remember last spring, maybe March, we put out a new guideline version for VSP and took in some comments. And so we just wanted to highlight some of the changes that we. So you might remember there were like 3 or 4 different documents in VSP that kind of encompass all the what you would call guidelines. It wasn't one document. So we took all of those and put them together into one thing to hopefully make it easier to track all the different rules for VSP. And then the other thing we did was we tried to make what was in there more align more closely with what was in the grant and contract manual so that there weren't as many differences with what's in VSP versus what we're doing for everything else to make it easier for everyone. So some of the changes is we added dips in the guidelines for VSP. Those were already eligible. We put it into the contracts that we did with the counties last biennium. So it was already an eligible thing. It just wasn't in any of the VSP guiding documents. So we added that in. We're going to do a monthly update on capital funding availability. So every month, Sarah puts out, this is your monthly email, right? Yeah. So Sarah will send out the newsletter, and if you're not signed up, you can reach out to us and we can tell you how to get on that. And I think the idea is we will be putting updates in there about how much capital funding is left, maybe how much is awarded. I don't have all the details on it, but to keep everybody more up to date on the status of the capital money. The training, so we took out the budget cap for training. There was in there, I think it was $2,000 a calendar year or a fiscal year. We took that cap out, so there's no more cap for training in VSP. And there's no more SCC pre-approval for training, so you don't need to reach out to me ahead of time for training money. The one thing that still applies, which applies for all VSP expenses, is making sure it's covered by your work group. Your work group has approved it. And it's still related to VSP activity. The other thing in there that we updated was for travel. There was a really specific clause in there for work group member travel, and it referenced, you'll see down at the very bottom, it specifically pulled out mileage as the eligible expense, but it's been changed to travel expenses as a whole. So more expenses are eligible for work group members traveling. Anybody have any questions on any of that?
There was a limit on how much mileage you charge, so the travel, was that then
Yeah, you mean for, so there was a limit for training.
Probable travel budget. And we might have seen that in that slide. But we
So
did that.
I want to clarify something though. There wasn't actually for travel to do work for VSP, like you're going to meet with landowners or you're going to a VSP meeting, there wasn't a cap on that. There was a cap for training, for like going to actual trainings, like coming here or whatever. There wasn't a cap on going to meetings with landowners. That's, I mean, part of the job.
Right.
And I feel like that was a big, there was something, because other people have asked me about that, a couple other CDs that came up a couple months ago during that big meeting in Spokane. I was on virtually and I was listening, and there was somebody else that said something like that. And I quickly messaged that person an email and was like, that's the work of VSP, is to go out and meet with landowners. And that's just charging mileage. Like you're driving to go to a farm, and that's related to VSP. And that's not something that was, it was a training cap is what it was, not travel.
But like retention events.
Yeah, travel related to training is one thing, but travel to go talk to landowners, that's the job. And yeah, that was, I was hearing that and I was like, I think there's a big misunderstanding out there. Because that came up a couple months ago and I heard someone say that and I was like, no, that's the work. That's not, there's no limit on that. So I'm sorry if that was a misunderstanding, but I know it was someone other than you guys too. It wasn't you, it was someone else. So it wasn't, it was in multiple places. So I don't know where that came from. And I apologize if that caused any problems, but regardless, now there's no cap.
Okay.
Go to trainings as long as it's VSP related. Go meet with your landowners as long as it's VSP related. Please, definitely. Good to know. So after we drafted the revised guidelines into one document, we sent them out for the 45-day comment period. Some comments came back. These were the things that we did not address in this version. And it's not to say that, you know, in the future, these might not be modified in some way, but these are bigger policy level SEC decisions that couldn't be made without changing policy. So the things that stayed in, the first is just, you know, language related to statute. The other one is the 120 days, that window from when you get awarded to when the project should start. And that applies across all of the funding sources. So that's a bigger issue that we didn't modify. And then the distribution of VSP funding, that's related to awarding the capital funds and how it's been done prior and how it might be done going forward. And that's still a discussion at SCC leadership on how that's going to work. So we didn't want to change it yet until a bigger decision is made. So,
Yeah, maybe a little staple there, but we've heard, just about more equitable distribution there, and at least knowing what's going on, give them a heads up about.
the funding criteria, that there were some comments related to that again is a bigger item that would need to be discussed and a policy, more of a policy decision made before we change that. And then, expenses for outreach and equipment. There's still the equipment $2,000 cap, and getting pre-approval for, equipment expenses that are over that $2,000. And I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what the comments were, but I'm guessing it might have been related to that cap, but that's again, policy related item. That's about it. Anybody have questions?
As I said, I do the accounting for the commission and also process grants. For travel tips and reminders, all lodging and like meals are all subject to per diem. And a good reminder of like what rate to use. Like if you have an overnight trip, this is where you lay your head. So let's pretend like you have a week-long trip, you're in Spokane some days and Coeur d'Alene the next days. If you travel from Spokane to Coeur d'Alene, this is the night in Coeur d'Alene, your per diem rates will be at Coeur d'Alene, because that's where you lay your head. The two spots to find the per diem rates is from the GSA website, and that's mostly for overnight travel, or also from the OFM website. And something that gets confusing, if you do use a GSA website for like per diem rates for overnight travel, they take out at least this $5 incidental rate. And so you don't, if you use the GSA breakdown, you don't get that $5 like reimbursed to your district. So pretend like you go to Bend and it's $64. Use the 64 or let's use 69. And Lincoln City. So you can use the 69 breakdown on the Washington State per diem map. And like again, like Bend, there's not 64 breakdown on the Washington State per diem map, so you can use these percentages. No something. Can you help that out? And so fees are actually part of per diem. Some hotel rates will charge cleaning fee, a service fee, and amenity fees, and those are actually part of the per diem rate. Which can put you over per diem. And also avoid online booking sites because those charge fees as well, and those will also put you over per diem. We've visited a lot of peer-to-peer rentals lately, and I wrote up some guidelines for peer-to-peer rentals, and I think you put in our newsletter. But with peer-to-peer rentals, they must be at per diem, including the fees. If there's multiple employees staying at the VRBO or Airbnb, the rate will be divided amongst the number of employees, and it has to be paid with the district credit card. And we asking for reimbursement, we ask that you include a list of all employees staying at the rental. We can only reimburse for commercial lodging facilities like the VRBO, Airbnb. I think those are the only two. And we can't reimburse for cancellation or damage fees. The receipts must itemize the cost. So I show like the room rental rate, the night fee rate, the fees, taxes, and the location of the rentals, just so that we can make sure that everything that's pretty good. For requirements for travel reimbursement, we do require an 80/20. And we require that you have the departure and return times, and this is important so that we know like what meals you can be reimbursed for. Signature dates are required. These two clauses. And it's required that all districts have a policy that establishes meal periods. Mileage. So the mileage rate will fluctuate from time to time. So pay attention. Right now it's at 0.67 as of January 1st. Hopefully you don't have any other mileage you have to request reimbursement for prior to that. But if you do, then you can always go to the OFM website and look at past mileage rates. Like refreshments, this is a fun one. So any food purchase has to have pre-approval form, copy of the agenda, list of attendees and receipts. So pretend like you buy a box of granola bars, that still needs all of this backup for it. Like copy like refreshments from serves, if it shows it's the most integral part of the meeting, like it's the back of very, that's something that like the state honors. Just like that document, that's the integral part of the meeting. The district must have a policy, a light refreshment policy set in place. And light refreshments are like coffee, non-alcoholic beverages, and in between meal snacks like granola bars, cookies, yeah, stuff like that. No pizza sandwiches, no wonderful dinners, you don't reimburse for meals and meetings. Yeah.
I've had a couple questions come up recently where districts have vouchers for full lunches, 50+ people lunches, dinners, and no grant program that the SCC has allows for any lunches, any breakfast, or any dinners. And that's an OF goal, it's not an SCC goal.
And our meeting authorization form is in our grant contract manual too.
Yeah, we have a template, right? And if that, if the specific business purpose, like actually speaking to where it says like why it's essential to include light refreshments in the meeting, if that part isn't filled out, we have to kick it back to you. And you have to fill that part out, because we have to have that metric.
The one thing the auditors support.
Yeah, they were very sticky in our audit, yeah, last year on having that in there. So we had to change our form, change the form, the template we provided for you guys to include that piece.
Question about the mileage rate.
Yes.
I noticed especially this last year in January, the feds raised their mileage rate, but took OFM like a month before they updated theirs. And I thought we had to go with the OFM, so I didn't change my mileage rates on our vehicles. So I had to pin and ink it later. But I'm just like, do we look at OFMs per diem? Sorry.
Yeah, so they should update, yeah, so they,
I know they should.
yeah,
Like that.
yeah, and they usually are pretty good about letting us know, and then we kind of get that information out, but yeah, so OM should have it, but, yeah.
Templates for that district, like refreshment or?
We don't have a template we have a template for the like refreshment policy for districts.
We don't have one, the regional manager might have a copy that they can provide, you know, to help you with that.
A minute. Yeah.
Yeah. On the website as well. So you guys can have a copy.
I saved a copy, so I'll take care of that. Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, guys.